Hello and welcome to CBG's special PlayStation meeting preview show. We're going to be talking about the big Sony PlayStation 4 unveiling due just within 24 hours. We're going to be covering off all the key topics, including the history of previous announcements and what they could mean for this. We're going to talk about the pad, we're going to talk about the games, we're going to talk about software partners, we're going to talk about possibly a giant hippo emerging, blowing out flames or something like that, whatever sort of tech demo they'll show. It's going to be great. So I'm Dan Dawkins, former editor of PSM3. I've got about 12 years working with PlayStation, for better or worse. And I'm joined today by Tim Clark.
Hello Dan, I also worked on the official PlayStation magazine for a while. I've never felt so close to you as I do now.
24 years of PlayStation between us. And Matt Elliott of CBG.
Yeah, I haven't got the years on you, but I've worked for OPM and first played the sort of previous Sony video product, so interesting times.
Man of PlayStation.
So Matt, you've been looking at the PlayStation 3 announcement at E3. What do you think we can learn from that, and what will it mean for the announcement tonight?
I think, looking at that one, I think you can fully expect it to hopefully not look a lot like the one from 2005, because in all honesty it's sort of excruciating. I think that's not too unfair a word. I mean, looking back at it, probably about the first 50 minutes, it's things like graphs, it's hardware specs, it's cell architectures, things like that. And I think this one is going to be, I'm hesitant to use the word lifestyle, but I think it's going to be much more sort of kind of consumer focused rather than this kind of sort of big overarching look what the machine does, because I think people they are interested in that. I think they just want to know, is it more powerful than X, and then they're going to want to see games. So I think it's going to be a lot slicker. It's going to be sort of more focused, and I think I'm hoping, I sort of have cautious optimism that it's going to be sort of a much more sort of kind of inclusive experience than the one in 2005 was.
It's worth bearing in mind as well that back in 2005 it was kind of before that all these sorts of conferences got streamed worldwide, and having it at E3 there's always a tendency to roll out, this is how many PS1s we've sold in India, and all that kind of stuff would go on forever before you actually got to any kind of real meat. Maybe a better example to look at is when they did what was then the next generation portable, which then became PS Vita. You then saw a much kind of, like Matt says, more kind of user-friendly viewing experience, which had more your gameplay sizzle reels, your discussion of what the thing could actually do. I don't think they showed the hardware then, and I think that's one of the big questions for tomorrow is, will they actually show the box? I don't know what you think, Dan, whether you think that's incoming.
I mean, I don't really know, and I think this would be a big topic later on. But what's interesting, like Tim says, is that you talked about in the olden days there was a set protocol for doing this, and things have changed. There seems to be perhaps clues already in the way things have changed, where they've released a series of 3 videos over the last couple of days, each one 2-minute video celebrating a different console. So we've had like a PlayStation 1 video, and a PlayStation 2 video and a PlayStation 3 video. What I thought was interesting was that each video isolates a different part of PlayStation history, and it's sort of telling, I think, the things they're celebrating, and it's making a point of socially what a difference PlayStation 1 made to the world, and also talking about the aggressive nature of their marketing campaign, and talking as well about the pad and the way the pad sort of set the paradigm for what controllers should be. Now again, given the rumours we've talked about previously with PlayStation 4, talking about the pad could be a really pertinent thing for the unveiling. The PlayStation 2 video focuses again on sort of advancements. It talks a lot about the first network adapter. Not that in itself was a good thing, as we can see from the relics over here.
Hands up who actually got their PlayStation 2 online. James, the sound operator, is indicating it. Didn't you for Tony Hawk's?
I did.
That was like the only game that had it, wasn't it? With a face, you could scan your face into the internet.
There were
other
there was that, and there was other games. But every time you had to sign in, particularly as a problem in the office, you had to re-sign in using the security protocol that I've deliberately forgotten the name of because I hated it so much. But it drove you insane, and it might have been different as at home and not in this work environment, but it was a really unpleasant
I don't know if I'll be
experience.
trumpeting PlayStation 2 as a great network innovator, I'll say that now. You had to screw the thing onto the back, didn't you?
Yeah.
Properly screw it on.
It was really frustrating. They also talked a lot about the introduction of DVD, which again you forget was quite a big deal. And certainly, in terms of getting it in homes, it's kind of selling it like a sleeper cell device to watch DVDs.
You can see they definitely tried that same. I've got one of these, and you've been to Japan recently, Dan, so I know you've got some views on this, but there's that kind of rigidity to, I think, the way they've operated in terms of new console launches. That, to me, they've always followed the previous launch quite closely. So PS3, you could see they tried to replicate the Trojan Horse multimedia thing, but with Blu-ray as opposed to DVD. But it didn't really feel like it had the cut through this time, because quicker than people expected, I guess they've moved to streaming movies and stuff. So I wonder what the Trojan Horse element this time will be, or what the kind of...
Well, I think that's actually an interesting point, because possibly for the first time they might be breaking with tradition, which again we can talk about later. But I think, given the way the world has changed and the way the console market has changed, I don't think they can afford to just iterate on what they've done anymore. So I mean that's interesting. But yeah, sorry, just to pull back to these things, they talked about the volume of games and the back catalogue and the volume of the back catalogue. And I think this is significant, given that we're expecting perhaps a Gakkai cloud back catalogue announcement. They do specifically state there's 10,000 games in the PlayStation 2 library alone. 10,000 games.
Do you think that would work on a way that sort of, if you've got the old game still, you'll be able to like scan the barcode in and be given access to it, or do you think you'll just have to flat pay for the game again?
That's the good idea you or I might have. Whether that's the idea Sony would have, and logistically maybe that's not a thing that can happen. I don't know.
I'll say it is a thing. You can do it on my phone. Come on, Sony. Stop selling me the stuff I've already got.
PlayStation, different, isn't it?
It's interesting what you were saying about like sort of it mirroring past conferences, because that again was a big thrust of 2005, as they look back and sort of I think the first thing that got a round of applause after this slightly awkward start to the conference was that the entire back catalogue of games was available, and people were sort of well on board with that. But obviously, them having mentioned it in this preview video and all the stuff leading up to it suggests that the machine itself won't be back.
I mean, it would tie into a lot of the whole kind of gaming as a service thing, and you're as much sort of subscribing to a PlayStation channel as anything. And they've made great strides with PS Plus. I think some people were quite sceptical about at the start, but now is regarded as quite a good value proposition if you're a punter.
I think that's part of the issue is people getting their head around exactly what it is that it could offer, sort of in replacement of optical media. And the way you described it in one of your videos as it being like a Spotify of video games, I think is a really sort of like a vivid way of imagining it. It'd be interesting to see if they do go that way.
But we basically agreed we're going to get a PlayStation 4 tomorrow. No one thinks we're not, right?
No, I think there's a worst case scenario.
You heard it, kids.
Yeah, there's a worst case scenario where they announce some kind of Gakkai. This is the back catalogue. I honestly would be absolutely staggered if they don't.
We've got like a number of writers flying over from the UK. There's a bunch of other journalists from all over the world going. Like I simply don't believe. Well, I believe Sony's too tight to pay for that to happen, unless they had something pretty big to show off, and that has to be new hardware. And also, it's like we're 7 years into a generation that everyone knows is now coming to a close. Everyone knows that there's the third parties are working on games. We get told about them every other week now. So it's time, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it would take the entire internet's sea of journalists to be wrong, which could happen. But
for a minute, I thought you did air quotes around journalists.
Sea of journalists. So I would be staggered if it's not PlayStation 4. And sorry, just finally on their release videos, they talk a lot about PlayStation Network, obviously in the PlayStation 3 video. Talk a lot about PS Plus, which you'd expect, because I think PS Plus will form a large backbone, or a modified version of it will form a backbone in the future. And they talk about it being the go-to destination for games and entertainment. So again, whether the machine continues being like a family entertainment hub, I don't know, but certainly like it being good at games. And all the videos stress the fact it's a fast machine. And they talk about PS3 driving the digital future. It uses the words, the machine that transitioned to a digital future.
Did it?
Yeah. So
I suppose it did.
Well, sort of. Now, whether Sony is setting us up for it's a digital future, and it's always on.
Well, I mean, it's going to be Blu-ray, isn't it? Still, I mean, these games aren't going to come down your pipe. I'm moving house, and I'm going to have apparently 3 megabyte a second broadband. Good luck getting a Uncharted 4 down that pipe.
over a 5-week download.
Yeah, well, I suppose Steam's proved with preloading. I mean, that to me, that's one of the interesting things. I think is the elephant in the room is Steambox and what kind of is happening in that sort of area, because you're coming up to a generation now, aren't you, with both the Sony and the Microsoft machine, where 7 years feels like it's incredibly long, and the pace with which technology is moving elsewhere, you can't foresee that these next machines would survive 7 years of kind of erosion by all the other challenges they face from iOS and from Steam and casual gaming over interactive TVs and stuff. So I'm fascinated to see what form these machines would take, because what sticks in the back of my mind is that whatever hardware comes around now needs to be something you can sort of iterate on and add to, and none of the sort of leaked specs seem to suggest that either the Microsoft or Sony solution will be that. It seems like they'll be powerful for now, off the peg PC solutions really.
To what extent then do you think that will perhaps change Sony's traditionally closed idea to the PlayStation network and perhaps to their business practices? Do you think they're going to try and open up the marketplace, change their pricing structures, introduce new ways to bill for things?
It's a massive question. I think one that speaks to the absolute heart of what the next gen could or might not be, because it would be unlike the way Sony and Microsoft have operated in a kind of proper oil and water sort of way. That's a ridiculous thing to say, but to open up in that sort of fashion, like it's the antithesis of the way all of them have really operated, and yet you see the challenges from elsewhere, and you sort of think that has to be the way they respond to it. So I don't know. It's very hard to sort of envisage what their approach to this new landscape is going to be beyond kind of like more of the same, which I would imagine to be like, well, more services, better technology in the sense, there's loads of frustrations about PS3 which you hope they would solve, from like cross game chat to you want it to be able to multitask different things probably rather than have to kick out to the menu each time, all that sort of, the speed with which things boots up and the endless firmware updates. Anyone who's got a PS3, I'm sure a 360 as well, could write you a laundry list of technical issues they'd expect the next gen to fix. But I think those things are almost like basic hygiene issues. You expect all that stuff to be mended, you expect it to be more powerful, have better graphics, yada yada yada. But what's interesting for me tomorrow is to go like, what is the dream you're selling me? What's the thing that I couldn't do before that I can do now? How's it going to change the way I play and experience games? We saw like the Destiny reveal yesterday, and I saw some people saying, well, it's just more sci-fi space marines with guns, but then the talk of the kind of the always on world was interesting. It did point to a different way of playing. It's that sort of stuff I think they need to sell to people. Is stuff we haven't seen before. Like game sales generally, AAA stuff is through the floor. Like they're in the bin, and that's because I think people are jaded. Like jaded with this generation and jaded with the same games.
Can it succeed without that sort of thing? Do you think, or not?
Probably depends. It probably depends how you define success. I think previously they reckon it costs like north of $1 billion to launch a machine. These are risky undertakings to go in for, and you now have like rapacious competitors in Google and Apple and all sorts of people and Steam who simply weren't there before. So
I think that's the key point. It's naive to expect that the competition is Nintendo or it's just Xbox. The looming shadow over all of tech is Apple. Really, you've changed what we expect from entertainment. And they've sort of hardwired our minds now to expect things that are instant. So when I get home and I want to read the internet, I flip open my iPad, the internet's ready within seconds. And often I see that's almost like a competing experience too. Do I turn on my console, probably wait for 3 firmware updates, possibly have to wade through a load of menus and not really enjoy the game for 2 hours, by which stage I could have played 3 apps, read the web and done God knows what else.
I mean, if you're a Sony loyalist, the fact that there are cues you could probably take from PS Vita as well, and the fact it boots instantly and can multitask most of its stuff probably is indicative of what they're thinking in terms of the OS. And of course you've got the trackpad as well, haven't you, which seems to be pegged as being quite likely for touchpad, not trackpad, for being on the new DualShock.
I mean, from what I understand and what CVG sources understand, there is going to be a reaction to Apple and the way they've changed the world. Do you think they'll actually go the full extent of embracing Apple products within their universe and like letting them interact with the new PlayStation?
Yeah, so at E3 last year, you saw certainly like Ubisoft was the most notable one with Watch Dogs, where they had this iPad app where you could go into other people's games and faff about with like the traffic signals to make to mess up their jump by kind of making a bridge open and stuff like that. And you've seen like Xbox with Smart Glass, and they've all got like decent phone apps now. And again, with the Destiny reveal, you saw people texting, "Hey bro, want to play some dude shooting?"
No.
Never call me again. Like whether they'll fold that sort of stuff into the announcement tomorrow, maybe not.
It feels to me that they've already got stuff in place that kind of replaces that, and in having like a touchpad on the controller and the Vita, which is in itself sort of a touch sensitive device. It feels like I can't see any reason why they would want to then sort of allow people to use it.
Yeah, I think it would be a grand folly on their part to work against Apple. I think if they were to say, don't use your iPhone or your iPad, use our 4-inch track screen at all times and never anything else.
You must buy a Sony Xperia phone. I'm all right, mate.
This is the follies of the past again. It gets back to what we said about it.
How willing are they to change?
Yeah,
and
if they are
embrace it?
truly willing to create something fairly open, something more, and exactly like you portrayed earlier on, we live in really rapidly changing times, and the idea of like a 10-year console right now seems preposterous.
Yeah.
Certainly unless it's extremely adaptive and relatively open to, free ways of working, I can't see any different.
Do you think we'll see games tomorrow then? New games?
Yeah, I think games, you have to show games or it's really boring. And now,
Or maybe we'll get animated concept art. That was another thing from the Destiny thing.
Destiny waiting
You
for
got a
it.
bit of game at the end, but
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. Now, Matt, have you got anything? What do you think they'll show in terms of games?
I'm not too sure about specifics, but I'm expecting it to be vastly different from the 2005 conference, and I don't think it will be the thing they tag onto the end. If you look back at that, there's a lot of games in that perhaps there's probably like 3 or 4 titles that you'd remember now. Like what was there's one on there that
I don't even remember what the launch games were.
Heavenly Sword was one of the ones that you probably remember now. There was
an incredible set of demos right at the start of E3. Like Matt pointed out earlier on, one of the demos was a Final Fantasy VII PS3 tech demo. Remember that?
Yeah, people are still sort of
vaguely.
like the Final Fantasy fans still clinging on to that as if it's still
Do-
might
do
happen.
you-
But is that luminous? Are we seeing a similar thing with that? Do you think?
Do you expect that people will come up off the back of seeing whatever sizzle reel or whatever they show, and that there'll be the usual kind of internet? Oh, it's all bull shots and fake footage and pre-rendered target gameplay.
I think there will be that if Sony don't do it in the right way. Now, a crazy theory I've always had, and I thought this would be fun if a bit fancy, is to show Killzone 4 footage to the crowd and almost make it look quite similar to the E3 2005 video, and really play up on the fact that they made a massive goof before. But as the guys play it, as it's being played on screen, it looks just like CG. I'd have Kazurai waddle on stage holding one of the ridiculous new PS4 pads going, press the pause button live on stage and go, here I am, I'm playing live Killzone 4! And everyone will go, whoa, crazy!
Share the last 15 minutes of gameplay.
I always felt like, I didn't always feel it, but I thought in the end they were vindicated over that Killzone footage, because the game did end up pretty much looking pixel for pixel the same as that trailer. But
today is the first. I've watched it back today for the first time in a few years, and it's the first time I've looked back and gone, those graphics don't look very good.
yeah.
Which is staggering, because at the time it seemed like a future we'd never reach.
I'm ready for next
Yeah.
gen. I went back to Skyrim on the weekend on PS3 and thought it looked bum now. And that's what I was sort of going at earlier with the pace of change. And we talked a little bit, didn't we, about like the specs being very PC centric, or it's off the shelf components largely. It's Nvidia, is it, or AMD, the graphics suppliers?
AMD.
But I've been playing like games recently on PC. I played Dishonored on PC and whacked the settings right up. I played some other stuff on Ultra, and you can sort of see, like, by benchmarking that way, like what next gen's probably going to be a bit like visually, and you wonder like how hard it's going to be for them to create that kind of OMG, I've never seen anything like this mood that you used to get with each new console announced, and you think it's going to be even harder for them to maintain it, because PC's not going to stop for anyone. PC's really been shackled for a while, hasn't it, by the PS360 sort of benchmark, and developers wanting to shoot for that because they want to hit a combined user base of 140 million machines. So what I wanted to ask you is how much, twofold really, like how much you think we'll see from third parties, and how much that third party software will be things that are released on both generations, or kind of like tagged to the PC version for the next gen stuff.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think we're obviously going to expect a number of key first parties. I think Matt was touching on earlier. We're going to get things like Evolution Studios are tipped to be working on, it's supposed to be like a Gran Turismo spin-off. Whether that's true or not, or it might have started life as a Gran Turismo
So actually in the
spin-off.
franchise?
Apparently it started life as a Gran Turismo spin-off. Whether it's that, whether it's a MotorStorm, it's certainly a racing game. No doubt it'll look pretty amazing. We're expecting Guerrilla Studios to show almost certainly Killzone 4, unless they're working on something else. It's not going to be Shell Shock NAM 67 2.
There's a few falls.
Yeah.
Cancel the plane tickets.
Yeah.
Possible, aren't there, really?
And that's quite possible. I think Obviously, Naughty Dog will be working on something for PlayStation 4. I almost wonder if they'll keep their powder dry for that for PlayStation 4.
They won't want to. I guess they won't want to distract from The Last of Us, maybe.
Possibly, yeah. I don't think they want to cannibalise from that.
They sort of work on a two-team process, don't they? So the team from 2 are on Last of Us, and the team from 3 are presumably on something else, which you can sort of speculate has been Uncharted 4, possibly.
But do you guys? I mean, they always tend to wheel out a few partners. Do you think they'll? Do you think, like, say, you think they'll have an Activision there or an EA? Or
but EA actually kicked off the one in 2005 with Fight Night. That was the first game you saw in it, which
I still think was one of the more impressive presentations. The old Ripley face.
Well, that was impressive, but part of me wonders if it was just to sort of move away from the, it's kind of a relief from endless graphs. Actually seeing some games in action, but it did look
so
pretty
down
strong.
on the graphs, Matt. Such a maths hater.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I did like about the graphs is they were bold enough to do like a direct comparison between their competitors. So they had their green bar that was above the Xbox's red bar.
I won't be doing that now.
Well, they'd have done that in PlayStation 2 was the best-selling console of all time. Of course, you'll do a graph. When it's with Xbox, and they go, whew, hot couple of
Good
years
news
there.
is no graphs.
Yeah. In the end, it was all fine. So, yeah, I don't know, we'll see with the graphs. That's why they've done these videos. They've done the videos to say, this is our brilliant past, this is all this stuff. I think they can, like you say, it's streamed to the world. It's going to be live, everyone's going to be watching it. They've got to hit hard. And they can't do half hour of a relatively trade show experience of, here's the old man from tech who's going to talk about all this crazy old stuff.
How long is it meant to be? Do we know? Is it now?
I don't know, to be honest.
How long was 2005? About 2 hours, probably.
2 hours.
Yeah, but that's an E3 then.
I was going to say, is the setting going to make a difference?
Yeah, you've got to cover E3. You've got to cover all the formats you have, the ones you're going to do. There's all sorts of other sort of gump. This will be quite focused on, I thought.
Yeah, I'd have thought half hour to an hour.
We saw with.
I reckon 50 minutes. I'm going to say 50 minutes. But yeah, third party wise, I think there'll be a couple of really key partners up there, and that's largely based off the back of, like I said, we've had people coming in recently talking about different games, sometimes ones which we know are already confirmed for current gen, but there's been very heavy nods that they'll also be appearing at the same time on next gen systems. And I think it's going to be interesting how that gets kind of messaged to potential buyers, because you're almost then asking people to upgrade rather than replace. You know what I mean? Like there's less of an obvious, you can only play this game if you get this system, which you tend to get. Like when Xbox One comes out, if you want to play Halo, you're going to have to get an Xbox. But if it's more like, well, the new FIFA or the new Call of Duty, to give 2 examples off the top of my head, are available on both systems, then it's probably like less compelling for you, especially in like a mega recession, to go, I'm desperate to shell out 400 quid or however much we think it's going to be just to play FIFA in 1080p rather than 720p. Like that difference is going to need to be made compelling.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's the thorny issue, and this is what the EA exec touched upon the other day, where he was saying almost like we've got to migrate our audience at some stage or create an inducement, because FIFA's PS3 global user base is on PlayStation alone 6 million. That's enormous, and not that many people are going to come out within the first few months and buy the new console and buy FIFA. So,
and if you're spending a fortune to develop you'd be mad, right? Pretty much to go, say we're making a new IP or a brand new game, we're just going to put it on next gen, because you're then ignoring that 140 million potential user base of people who own the last gen. And if the games are quite similar, the accountsman would beat you out of the office if you suggested that was the plan. Try getting games on Wii U where there's no user base. Like no one's developing it for that same reason. Now they know they know PS4 and whatever Durango ends up being called are coming, but I think you're going to see like at least a year of third-party games coming out on next and current gen systems simultaneously.
Definitely, there's no way they can ignore it.
No. But I think I don't know how good that news is for. But maybe it's fine. Like if you're a core gamer, like people watching this and people are sat here, you're going to go, look, I want to see it looking as good as it possibly can look, or have the extra features that are only on next gen. But
yeah, I think that again at the start there'll be people who just want to buy the new hardware for the sake of the new hardware. And actually, the point you made about visuals, I totally agree. As in, PCs now are probably as powerful as actually PlayStation 4 is going to be, more or less. But there's still a factor of like when the hardware is bespoke, it is purely built for video. It will be capable of more impressive visual effects, and it's more about sort of the art and the style of the teams who are creating the games. And if you look at The Last of Us, for example, now, which is 6-7 years into the hardware's life, it still looks astonishing, and I think it's that, and I'm convinced there will be a piece of footage or a game where we'll all go, My giddy aunt, I can't believe how good that looks.
Will it be The Last Guardian? Will that be just the same
Yeah.
the same footage, just slightly higher res?
Well, what I'm hoping is that
Finally!
The Last Guardian footage leaks early on Tuesday in another fiasco of leakage, and then comes out on PlayStation 5.
Do you think, I mean, traditionally with both E3 and just almost any sort of like hardware manufacturer event, there tends to be like mega leaks in the sort of day and hours beforehand. Are you anticipating that something will probably spill out before this? I mean, we've seen the pad shots on the net.
I'm praying not. I mean, again, from what I understand from within Sony,
Don't want Christmas ruined, Dan.
well, I don't want Christmas ruined. I don't want a preview of all my presents. Imagine that. You're waiting for the
You're
Christmas
talking about
day.
he used to climb up into the loft to
Some
look
guy
at
on
his
Twitter
own
tells you
presents.
everything he's got.
I've spoiled a few presents in my time, but I didn't want to go on the internet and see my presents on a preview wheel. I certainly didn't want to see that.
Especially if your present looked really ergonomic.
Can I complain early? I've not opened it yet.
Mum, I'm furious, I just can't tell you what about.
Jaguar.
This sucks, lols. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
Whether you thought they're going to be leaks or not.
The point I was making was in Sony, apparently, they've been super tight with disclosure about who actually knows within Sony, because Sony obviously have a very sketchy track record.
Yeah.
Again, relating back to that famous Last Guardian footage leak and various other things. So I think that this time around, if they've got any sense, if we're talking about it, they'll be talking about it, they would have locked down to like almost the head count of the people who know, or who know the significant things. And again, there'll probably be tiers of information they'll release to different members of staff.
That was my understanding, is that people at Sony now are sort of walking past their colleagues that sort of have a smug look on their face, knowing exactly what's going to happen on Wednesday, and other people are just completely in the dark.
I wonder if there's any of them sat there just like looking really frightened. These things can go wrong. Like, I remember, Dan, you and I being there for the massive crab year, which was the year I think after the target footage, and yeah, we held hands throughout the press conference almost, because it was a
Genji Crab
so uninspiring.
was a dark moment.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not really the forum, but I've had many moments. I remember the first time that Phil Harrison re-showed Killzone, the time after the fiasco, and it was finally working and running with the pad. And again, I think I'd had a few wines, and I saw him afterwards.
It was at the restaurant, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a joke. I went, sure, that was real time, Phil. That went really, really well, that did.
He's at Microsoft now, don't you?
Yeah, exactly, see?
So, footage as well, I saw that someone, I think Andy Kelly was talking about last week, of Phil using the 6-axis to control Warhawk, and it's sort of flying into buildings and getting stuck on stuff. So
Six-axis is very much a current gen feature.
Yes.
Surprised it hasn't been used more.
do you feel, is there any sort of spectre of 6-axis in what we've seen in the preview of the current game?
Well, should we talk the pad maybe? And what if does the prototype pad that's leaked look genuine? And do we think those functions will make it across to the final?
It's definitely genuine.
controller?
Yeah,
It's
people seem to be
definitely
at pains to say that it's definitely genuine.
Too many people I trust think it's genuine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit sort of cautiously optimistic, but part of me feels like it is just they have this nice sort of touchscreen technology that they're kind of wedging into a pad a little bit. I don't know if that's grossly unfair.
I think for the first time I saw it, it had the massive whiff of third party. I nearly said a really unpolitically correct term.
Yes.
Pad.
We treat all third parties equally here.
But on the second shot that was leaked, it looked a bit more sleek and usable. You don't want, like, I was chatting to one of my colleagues here who's published a lot of the PlayStation mags, and he was really relieved that it still looked very DualShocky, because that for a bunch of people that's why they stick with PlayStation, because they're very comfortable with that pad. And the Move Tech, I won't miss the Move Wand if it means an end to that. So having the little
That interests me though, because I think Move for me was definitely by far the best piece of motion control tech. Maybe the games weren't there to support it, but whenever you got anything that used it well, it stood head and shoulders above everything else. And I thought always the problem was that there were two problems really: that it lacked precision in terms of just like the buttons on the machine itself didn't work in like a normal pad, and obviously you circumvent that by having it attached to a pad you're familiar with. But also if it's there all the time, then obviously people are going to be far more inclined to develop games that use it. And
yeah, that's a good point. You're guaranteeing the whole user base has motion control.
Yeah.
But I guess Microsoft's going to do the same thing, aren't they? Going to make
Absolutely.
Kinect obligatory.
Kinect 2 is almost a certainty. It's going to have much higher levels of control, like down to your fingertips. Now, like Matt says, the key point was that Move was always actually a great piece of tech. It's just that it came in a slightly unfortunately phallic container device And it's only now that they've probably found. I mean, you can. They're not going to drop it. That's a certainty. It's celebrated extensively in the PlayStation 3 video they've just released. They've just signed the deal with Wonderbook and with the Harry Potter series. They've got a deal with Disney, which is yet to show anything from. So again, if you were to launch a PlayStation 4 Move-compatible set of Disney books for kids, that's really compelling. So I just don't see that technology going away.
I feel a bit weird. I guess, will they still do like a separate one? Because if you're playing like a tennis game, it's going to be hard to use that controller as like a sort of a faux tennis racket or whatever, isn't it?
There was some speculation as to it sort of splitting into kind of like a transformer, wasn't there, at some point, I think?
That
which is
that rumour floated around for ages. The other one that I was curious about, so there was a lot of talk about that share button, wasn't it, which would grab the last 15 seconds of gameplay that you could then put on the YouTubes or
that's
or
potentially
onto PSN.
amazing. I think that's the thing that probably excites
me.
me.
I think that's a really great idea, but that doesn't seem obviously there on the pad.
Yeah, the button that was rumoured has fallen off the pad that we've seen. Now,
but isn't there some sort of the touchpad might be clickable?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I know as an almost certainty that somewhere in the world there is a PlayStation 4 pad that has or had a share button on it. And I firmly believe that functionality will be in the machine. Now, whether it's explicit, like a share button, or whether, as you say, it's like a hidden menu function or a trackpad thing, but if Sony are being adaptive and are creating like a new way to play into share footage, and just to be in line with what the world does, because everyone's on YouTube or Instagram or sharing things.
So who hasn't as well been playing a game and they've thought like that was an incredible goal or what an amazing headshot that was, but then even the games which do have systems for capturing and including that sort of stuff, it's always a massive ball ache that you've got to go, I'm going to create an account and I'm going to log in and I'm going to edit the thing. You just want to be able to go bang one button in the same way as you retweet something on your phone or whatever. That's how you want to be able to send it. It needs to be like a meta thing that sits on top of the whole operating system.
Worked very, very well with OnLive. I don't know if you ever saw the brag clips, which were just sort of there straight away, like a sort of a wall of clips of brilliant things that happened. And unfortunately, you don't have that thing with YouTube, it sort of naturally filters and pushes the good stuff to the top. Like, it was harder to find stuff with the brag clips, and as long as it's integrated well with YouTube, that's going to be great. I think that one of the things that the Wii U does surprisingly well is the community stuff, and you're always able to kind of pop out of that game you're in, go somewhere else, share something you've done, and push to YouTube. I was
going to say exactly that. Yeah,
it's like the in and out that you need, I think.
Whenever you die in Mario, you just get like 5 drawings that people have done, just going, stupid Mario, like basically the things that aren't swearing that have made it through Nintendo's filters. But you always feel like for the first time, I'm not alone. There's a bunch of other chumps like me who can't make that jump.
It makes every game Dark Souls,
Like I'd happily see if you can share footage in that way, you'd want to see like you'd want to pull up like what else have people shared at this point in this game, and it would be interesting. I think it'd be interesting.
So we talked about the trackpad or the touchpad. Do we think that is a real thing? What sort of functionality do we think that will allow?
I'm bemused by that, I'm quite honest.
I think it's definitely real, and I think on a really base level you could use it easily for like navigating menus and stuff, but I've seen other people talk about using it for precision things like lining up headshots, like maybe you kind of click to zoom and then you move it around. I don't know. Like,
do you think you want that?
I don't know. It's got a whiff of gimmick about it.
It's got a whiff of Vita rear view mirror, hasn't it?
It's got it's the size of a matchbox. It just seems like a strange, like you touched upon, like Homer's car of the future.
Yes,
where it's got like soft and yielding, like a Nerf ball. It just seems that they're throwing everything at the kitchen sink.
Like, does anyone
and that
expect
trackpad seems like it just doesn't fit. Like maybe.
But that's my worry about the whole system. Is the whole system they'll take all their cues from all these things that are happening in sort of technology and entertainment and go, fit it all in the box, but make it cheap.
It's the machine that does everything.
Yeah, and you end up going, God made me wrong, just let me die, and smoke will be billowing out of the back of it.
We're expecting trackpad on the back.
No.
Surely. No?
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
That back one's useless on
well,
the
that's
Vita.
sort of what surprised me, is because it's just an inconvenience, isn't it?
You spend the whole time trying to work out how to switch it on.
I do think there's a sense of that picture of the pad that seems genuine, that's leaked. It seems, I think those functions must clearly have been communicated to developers. So I'd say in a way it's almost like a feature complete. I think those features will appear, whether not in that ergonomic fashion, but they will appear and they will be integrated into games. In the same way they bullied everyone to use 6-axis in the early days, and all this stuff will be there. Whether it survives the shakedown of time, we'll see. But
I don't think you need a trackpad to be massive for it to function quite simply if you're doing like menu stuff and that, because if you think like the dimensions of certainly an original iPhone aren't huge for you to guide your index finger around.
Yeah, fair point. And I think as well what it allows is if we are talking about a truly open world where, for example, you're playing a football game and you're editing your formation with a touch phone off, when you're not on your console, you want a similar control experience when you actually are inside the game, so it feels more seamless.
Yeah.
So you could like mimic the touchpad formation shifting.
And there'll
with
be
the
like
pad.
developers who I'm sure come up with like really smart uses of it. Like you might be playing kind of the new Skyrim, and to do like a scroll or something, you might have to do a quick circle or a cross or
You'd
whatever.
expect Koch to do something amazing with it.
Yeah.
Some sort of kind of like a like the analog thing taken down to its absolute sort of end.
There's no reason to fear the touchpad, certainly. One thing people do fear though, there's been a lot of talk about all this kind of always on, certainly with Microsoft net stuff and the used game blocking. Do you think they'll talk about any of that kind of stuff tomorrow?
Suicide, surely.
I think it's in danger.
Now the suicide section.
Yeah, it's in danger.
Things you won't like.
Bring the swords.
If they confirm that, it becomes the story, and I think it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Now they may leave an area of ambiguity around it. I mean, my personal feelings are down the track. I think this is something they want to do.
I think it's coming down the pipe as
Yeah,
well.
and I think the only thing stopping it is sort of an unfortunate historical legacy of they do still need retail, they still need shops, that the internet isn't fast enough. So they need those things to keep going sort of for a couple more years. But like again, this video says the transition to the digital future. So you're using the words digital future, it's what they feel is happening. And it's inevitable, surely. Eventually, internet speeds will get to the level where it works.
Without, I not wanting to go on too much of a tangent of it, but I think there's probably some sort of model where people still sell each other their discs they don't want anymore, or they do that through like an intermediary, like kind of an eBay equivalent or whatever, and then the software publishers, your EAs and Activisions, then sell you a code in the same way they sell you an online pass to unlock that thing, and that will maybe be $10 or £10 or whatever. So that way the money flows back to developers and publishers in a way that it currently isn't, because they're locked out, and that's why they're furious about it. They're locked out of that current purchase cycle, and the shops take all the money. Now the issue is the shops seemingly cannot. It seems like they can't survive anyway, but they definitely can't survive without pre-owned. So
Pre-owned is where all the money is.
yeah,
well,
there's no doubt if you're sat there in a smart white shirt at EA or Activision, you want a way to carve that pre-owned money back into your company. So I'm not at all surprised. But I think the people who are saying it's suicide for consoles are overstating it. I think they'll find a way of it suiting certainly them and consumers.
Yeah,
I don't think it will happen tomorrow. I think you're right, Matt. It won't be talked about.
When I say it's suicide, I don't think it's suicide for the console. I just mean in terms of the presentation of.
Sure, yeah,
tomorrow,
it would be disastrous, yeah. But like nearer to release, maybe.
What you say is, I think, exactly right. Is in the ideas in the public consciousness, or certainly amongst the hardcore, that there may be a reality without used games. In a way, the furor's already started and not been resolved, but it's out there. That course of debate. Now, Sony could quite happily come up with an interim solution, like you say, of like codes that act like activation codes, and it's a kind of everyone's sort of happy. It works, and it will be enough to bubble through until we get full on, digital. I think that will be the future. I think longer term, there is a bigger point about the amount people expect to pay for games, and currently in the digital marketplace, certainly on PSN, that amount is absurd. Where you wouldn't expect people to take a risk on a £60 PSN game. If it looks a bit like we've seen loads of not very good 6 out of 10 games selling for £60. You'd be insane to pay that. But if the marketplace becomes more like Steam, becomes much more open and free and properly reacts to market prices, and actually PS Plus has sort of done this and alleviated it a bit. If after a few months a game will be down to £20 or even £10 in the fullness of time, or there's Steam style sales, the lack of a second-hand market will no longer matter.
UK retail's crazy though. Anyway, I mean, you only have to wait like 2 weeks after almost any game comes out and it will drop to £20 somewhere. And likewise, you watch what happens on Steam, and you can see how value sensitive people are and the way they respond to things, humble bundles and the sales they do. But again, it's probably tomorrow's going to be all about dream weaving and selling you ideas. I think probably rather than I doubt we'll even get the minutiae at E3 probably. I mean, with the Wii U, you barely knew what was happening with it until the thing was actually in your hands and downloading an enormous system update. So they can afford to leave a lot of the detail probably late. They'll be trying to convince you that next generation is something worth getting on board with, I guess, tomorrow.
With that in mind, do you think how close are we going to be to seeing any kind of a price, do you think?
No.
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 Simply no. Because again, it's another thing they go, the machine looks brilliant, but it's £500, or or whatever it is. I think it becomes a distraction from, and again, I suppose if we're wrapping up and talking about what we expect from tomorrow, I think tomorrow's all about it's the dream, it's the desire.
E3 maybe for price. I wonder tomorrow whether they'll even talk about when it's coming out. Like I think they may. If it's, I mean, our friends over at Edge have suggested that they're expecting it out, the next PlayStation out in Japan and North America like this year. So if that's the case, they'll probably have to say that tomorrow. You'd have thought, wouldn't you?
Yeah, they've got to give you a time frame for your excitement, because if people are left going, I'm excited, but
my excitement is too non-specific.
Yeah, non-specific excitement.
I can't stay this excited.
Cannot process. And I think they will. They will say it's going to be within this window. And you expect that, and they may even, I don't know if they'll start pre-ordering.
Do you think you'll be excited by the whatever time it is tomorrow night? Is it tomorrow?
Well,
Yes.
I
I'm
can't
more
wait.
excited having spoken about it now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, let's wrap up. Let's talk about like what you're expecting them to show,
Yeah.
what you hope they show,
Yeah.
and almost kind of like what they've really got to do to make it work.
Yeah. I'm expecting at a bare minimum they'll name the machine. They won't show the actual box of the machine. They'll show the pad, and they'll show 3 or 4 first-party titles at some sort of medium length. They'll bring on a couple of partners. 2. I'm going to say 2. I'm going to be specific. They'll bring on 2 partners. One will be a sports game, and one will be not. And they'll show a bit of what they can do. And they might be multi-format. And then there'll be like a kind of a sizzle reel of some other partners, and there'll be a bit of service stuff. I think that's the minimum. I'd love to see the actual box. I think that's what would get me really pumped. I'd love there to be a feature or an idea that hasn't even entered the public domain yet, but I don't think that will happen, because the reality is these companies are like the biggest colanders in the world these days, and I can't remember the last genuine surprise really. And my absolute dream scenario would be for some either brand new third or first party game that we haven't seen to come on and just absolutely blow people away in the way that other games have in the past. The first time we saw MGS2 and stuff like that, I'd love to have that moment. Yeah.
Is there in your mind like a dream game or a thing that could happen, like a moment that would be like, whoa?
I'd love Rockstar I'd love like one of the houses to roll out on stage and just go, GTA 5 is actually on next gen, this is how it looks. I'd love that.
Dan Houser's in one of the sizzle reels from 2005, so fingers crossed. Maybe I can't really compete.
As
with...
was footage of Red Dead.
Yeah, that's
back
astounding. Yeah,
2005. Looking not much like Red Dead did. Sort
maybe
of
they'll just show they just show the agent logo again.
Yeah. Yes, it was coming. Yeah. Here it is, Agent, the Last Guardian. They're all coming.
Yeah. I can't really compete with that. Very much the same, except I'm probably a bit of an optimist, and I'd love to see the actual machine itself.
What do you think the machine would look like?
Well,
I know you're not an industrial designer. It's a lot to think about.
Hopefully less like a bread bin than the last one. I think
Give us a
smaller.
Colour.
Black, I reckon. That's incredibly boring, but black.
Black looks at 7,000 black PlayStation machines.
Yeah,
around
no,
it.
it seems obvious, doesn't it? Going sort of wildly speculative, I would expect it to be the kind of thing that would sit in a living room and be sort of completely inconspicuous.
I'm going to say silver.
We're going back to silver.
Black's almost certainly right, but do you remember how much everyone loved the stupid silver boomerang? That must be on some market research document, silver strong.
Yeah. Live feed, like silver, tick.
Yeah, I'm expecting sizzle reels, maybe sort of in 2005 they did sort of talking heads from key developers, names you're going to recognise, so maybe a few big names sort of extolling the virtues of the machine, things like that. But
there'll be a bit of surely like friends of PlayStation doing the old, like the kind of high school reunion stuff about how great PlayStation is.
Yeah, there's some kind of
that's going to
retrospective.
burn through your first 15 minutes of it, I guarantee you.
Yeah, there'll be a condensed, we're brilliant, they're brilliant. Let's talk about the future.
Yeah, never mind about the Vita. Moving on. And I think the rest will definitely be games. I think, you'll see sort of more gameplay footage, 3 times as much gameplay footage as you did in 2005, and rightly so, I think.
I would like Ken Kutaragi to come out of retirement and be wheeled on stage in a wheelchair with a long blonde wig, like Kurt Cobain at the Reading Festival, and then just jump out, grab the mic, and go, "I'm back," and then unveil like an enormous super machine.
Go. I have burnt down the AMD factory, and we are proceeding with Cell Chip 2. At expensive risk of folly. Closed loop network. That won't happen. That would be amazing. Now that would knock my socks off.
What do you think, Dan? Then what's your prediction?
I think you're right. I think they're going to sell a dream, and I think to truly almost shake us out of the apathy of the last few years. I mean, I won't soft soap it. I thought last year was really tedious for core console games. I'm not saying games weren't good; they were brilliantly produced, but I thought they were absolutely formulaic. There were very few surprises. The surprises and the things I enjoyed were in probably the iOS and tablet space, or PC, or different realms. I think they've got to do something that really shakes your notion of what a console game can be. I think that could be like the share function. It could be the nature of embracing wider control inputs. It could be the idea of, games are almost platform agnostic, that you can take them anywhere and play them anywhere. I think that will be a big change.
It feels like, I think that's interesting, because it feels like in the same way as PS2 promised online but didn't do it, PS3 sort of promised games would exist in multiple places, like you'd be able to play FIFA on your Vita and on your PS3 and it would be shared, but didn't really didn't deliver on it at all. Maybe there's a future in PS4, you controlling them on your phone and your tablet and having two versions of it on Vita and PS1.
Yeah, I think it would be like a
I've
Scrum.
got a Vita and now sort of bummed myself out a bit.
A Scrum mastered device that does it all. And we haven't really talked about Gakkai and in the fullness of time the transformational effect of that, because if, as we suspect, in the fullness of time they do moderate used games, Gakkai then becomes their controllable subscription service access to sell you a famous back catalogue of tens of thousands of PlayStation games, and they can cut that pie up lots of different ways. Where they can either say, you pay for PS Plus and you get XYZ services, free games, early access to demos, and a little taste of Gakkai. Or it could be things like Sky, for example, where they go, get the classics channel on, Gakkai, and you get every platformer ever made for £2 a month. And then you buy a package to suit your gaming needs. So you can have a platform channel.
Imagine going around with a guy's house, he's just subscribed to the PS1 real-time strategy, like something super niche.
PS1 RTS, that's all I'm going
I'm not
for.
playing anything else.
But maybe that will work, and they can throw, like Sky do, you can buy channels for £1 a month. And if they had that sort of piecemeal strategy, and it's very much of the time to let people customise their own experience.
Well, it's very much of the time as well for any media company to be trying to make more money out of its back catalogue. It's what the record industry's done for years, isn't it? I mean,
exactly that. And I think
Steam are incredibly good at it as well, aren't they?
They've got to, because I don't think they can get away with
relying on the AAA,
the £60
very rare
game
releases.
sold through shops. And I think the digital market will have to become much more flexible and feature much more reductions. I don't think that's necessarily for tomorrow, but I do think that's coming down the line. I think tomorrow we'll be just selling you this new way to interact, and what your idea of a console is being shifted and very much dream weaving. And hopefully they'll pull out a few big guns with the games. Like you, I'd go crazy if GTA was announced. I think that would be. GTAs are amazing, and how evocative would it be if they went, "This is the HD GTA 5 you were looking for"? You'd be like, "Wow, that's amazing."
What would be the sort of other killer first-party games that
Metal
like
Gear
a Turismo?
Well, Turismo, would look amazing. Metal Gear 5 or the Phantom Pain or something. If Kojima, I say this for every conference ever made, but I want Kojima on a jetpack coming down on stage and going, Metal Gear Solid 5 or the Phantom Pain.
Is the Phantom Pain confirmed as being a Metal Gear game now? Even though everyone knows it is?
No, but there's it's got to be. There's so many links that make it a Metal Gear Solid game.
So that could easily be there tomorrow. Do you think?
And Ground Zeroes, which has been talked about, that's due to come out in the limelight again soon. Kojima's talking about Fox Engine at GDC in March. It's obviously due for its public unveiling.
The games you'd think would appear in the sizzle reel, you'd think there'd be probably some sports stuff. There'd be Ubi's slate. We know that there's other reveals beforehand, aren't we? And I guess things like Star Wars and Watch Dogs.
Yes, yeah,
the obvious sort of candidates to appear in your wrap-up 3-minute.
Yeah, they'll tick off every key partner to go, they're on board, they're producing content for us.
Square must be sat on something because they've got the engine, the Loomis engine.
Do you think we'll see anything absolutely new? Because that's the thing that surprised me about 2005 at the end. There was a sizzle reel with loads of new stuff.
Yeah, I think they'll have to.
Is that still viable these days?
Yeah, because I think you have to, because otherwise you fall back into that trap of people being fatigued with what the current stuff is. So unless there's 2 or 3 new IPs in there, you only need to see the way people react now to IPs like Watch Dogs and that just not being a sequel. Yeah, you remember me as well.
And I think again, like the jewel in Sony's crown is probably Uncharted now. Like if they can show, whether they tease it or show it in full, if they go Uncharted 4,
they could do like they did with Kratos before, just a bit of Nathan Drake going,
yeah,
and that'll be enough.
Looking sensational, and you'd be like, tune back for E3,
Yeah.
I'll be there.
But
Well,
maybe Media Molecule, will serve something new up, or want a studio like that.
yeah, and this is exactly the time to do something new, because you're a captive audience when you sign on, and you do want to try something different.
I'd be interested to see actually if I'd like to think Guerrilla would do something that wasn't Killzone. I wouldn't mind if it was still in the shooty space, but I'd love to see them take their tech and apply it to. I'm sort of hell-gassed out at the moment. I'll be singing a different song tomorrow if it looks good. But.
I know we're trying to wrap up, but just sort of to poo-poo this completely if you don't think it's going to happen, but 4K, we're pretty much sure that there's no way that this machine would be able to even have the optical media big enough to run 4K games. Is that right?
It might be able to technically output a 4K signal. I wouldn't rule that out at all. I just don't see that as being like a standard feature any more than 1080p was.
No,
this generation for the same reason
it's
that
still
it's
not
so
there, yeah.
processor hungry and like the benefits are like marginal. Like it sounds like a massive number, but unless you've got an 85-inch screen, you're not really going to see the
25
difference.
grand, no one.
But if you watch like a brand new film, right, a film that's been shot in the last couple of years, and you watch it in 1080p, you don't sit there going, Jesus, I wish there was some more lines of resolution there. You go like, that is a huge lifelike picture. 1080p is fine for that. I think it would just be a misuse of the programming grunt.
It would be a complete madness to chase in anything other than a sort of is a porcelain
Cock
dolly
waving, yeah.
type way. It's a ridiculous notional thing.
They failed to convert people to 3D as well, didn't they? So
We didn't even talk about
Want to
that
talk about
correctly,
3D
yeah.
because 3D is the one thing that
No
was
one's talked
championed once during PS3's lifetime that's completely omitted from their celebration video.
Do you know what? It will be
3D is under the carpet, big projection underneath.
It will be included as the thing, and I imagine they'll build the libraries and the tools so that if you want 3D, it's fairly easy to do. But it's a curate's egg of a piece of tech.
Speaking of eggs, because we absolutely can't do without mentioning it, ducks. We're going to see ducks.
Phil Harrison's famous ducks. The thing is, I think the ducks for me are synonymous with Phil Harrison.
So they've
who
gone
now
with
works at
Phil.
Microsoft. So
Ducks have been taken out and slaughtered.
I think there's something too Philish. Like, where's Phil? There's the ducks. Where's Phil?
Do you know what?
So-
Though? I hope there is like one super glamorous bit of just like here's some flaxen hair in the
Yeah.
sunlight.
Say one super glamorous
Love all
duck.
that stuff.
Well-
Yeah, one beautifully rendered goose. Simply.
Leave that to Square Enix.
The
Yeah.
PlayStation 3 was unveiled, and we talked about it. The giant rotating colourful face of Alfred Molina.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Like,
What
I'm
better
not
way
saying
to
I want
sell
him
your
back,
machine?
not like a
The
middle-aged
T-Rex
cranky-
on PS1.
Yeah.
It's usually a bit of that. It's good showmanship.
Yeah.
So you can predict that. So T-Rex PS1, Alfred Molina PS2. Where'd you go with?
Oh,
I will go for a beautiful sperm whale cresting out of the water with the sunlight glinting off the spume from its blowhole. And I just thought of that
You heard
on
it here
spec.
first.
There's no paper.
specular shaded blowhole emitting big phosphorus clouds of
Fantastic instance.
rainbow. I don't know.
Yeah, because do you know what? I'm gonna now act as if there's working out to my theory, because they'll have watched like Life of Pi or something. Is that the one with the tiger in a boat?
Yes.
Yeah, they'll have watched that and gone, that's what the kids are like these days.
Yeah.
Whales.
The judgment will come in less than 24 hours. I think it's fairly safe to say Tim will be only at best partially correct. Now, don't forget, we'll be back for more insightful banter like this almost immediately after the show, which is at 11 p.m. We'll be watching the live feed of the PS4 unveiling. That's 11 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. I believe it's 5 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yeah, check out the live blog on CBG.
Yes.
All the stories will be going up as they happen.
But yeah, we'll be here watching it live and probably back in this position reacting to the show immediately after, and our reaction video should be live probably the early hours or certainly first thing as you wake up on Thursday morning. So that's it. So yeah, we'll see you Thursday morning, and until then it's bye from me and bye from Tim and Matt.
Cheerio.
Ta.